Okay, what's up with it? So a couple of days ago, Blizzard announced the new Hearthstone expansion, Scholomance Academy, and they released about maybe 15, 16 cards, something like that. So I thought let's just give it a whirl and talk about them a little bit. We'll start with this one, Transfer Student, which is actually currently out to be played with, and it has a different effect based on whichever game board you play. So there's now a game board meta, I guess. Um, I think there's only like 8 game boards in standard, so there's only a few um, effects to learn and to account for. Two mana 2/2 is pretty decent body, and most of the effects are pretty solid as well. Um, I think this has a good place in faster decks, tempo decks like Demon Hunter decks of past, and maybe like Zeus style decks, because one of the things is like +1/+2. There's like deal 3 to 2 different minions, enemy minions, after it awakens from being dormant. There's like a couple different effects that are pretty decent for contesting the board. So I think this probably finds a place in some of those decks. I think it's pretty solid neutral 2 drop, probably on the higher end of neutral 2 drops, and I guess we'll have to see how things go. But I'm gonna say that this is gonna be like I'm gonna give this like a 3 out of 5. This one, Druid card, which is 10 mana, gives all of your minions +4/+4 wherever they are in their hand, your deck, in the battlefield, all of that. They get +4/+4. Um, 10 mana is pretty expensive. I think you really only want to play this with like Kel'Thas and the new innervate, because you can like double innervate Kel'Thas and play this on what turn? It gives you 4. The coin is 5, so 2 on as early as turn 2. You could do that. Pretty sick, but kind of memey, I'm guessing. If you can't really cheat it out, you don't really care to play it, really, and it's kind of worthless in spell druid type builds, because the current spell druid builds, don't run any monsters or minions. But even if you want to add minions to try and play around with this, you kind of get to a point where you're sacrificing your um, either you're sacrificing your minions in order to consistently ramp, or you're sacrificing your ramp in order to consistently find minions that are going to be buffable by this. So I think this is going to be mostly Mimi. I'm going to give this a 2. Nature Studies. This is actually pretty cool. It's a really nice mechanic that allows you to pre-play this, and you can even keep the discount for your next turn, so you can do more Mount Seller shenanigans. Like, you can set this up on turn 6 before your Mount Seller, so that you can add an extra spell into your Mount Seller turn. You can like play this on turn 3 or on turn 2, and then you can overgrow on turn 3. That's pretty sick. I think it's pretty flexible, and most of the spells, druid spells in standard that cost 2 or less, are pretty good and pretty solid in terms of using it like with a Mount Seller or something. So I think you actually are willing to run this in current spell druid lists. I think the big question is, what do you want to run this instead of in the deck? It's a pretty tight list already, in the sense that you're already trying to run as many cheap spells as possible, and the remaining ones are kind of necessary to not die in case you're getting snowballed or put into awkward spots. So it's really important to be able to keep your deck balanced well enough. And like maybe you want to consider running this over something like a claw, but sometimes you actually need the claw so you don't get killed by like a fairy dragon or something, early on in the game. I think really the big kicker here is that you can discount your next spell, so you can do more shenanigans, like preemptively play this, and then like on turn 10 you can like overflow and swipe. I don't really know why you would necessarily want to do that, but you can do like a Ysera and a 2 mana spell, like a lot of different things that you can activate. I think Fungal Fortunes going to 3 is actually pretty nice to bring this kind of card into the meta. Also, that innervate. I think it's a pretty neat card. I'm gonna give it a 3, maybe a 3.5. Let's talk first day of school. 0 mana adds 2 random 1-cost minions to your hand. It actually feels pretty good. I don't play enough Paladin to know, but adding more tempo to the early game feels pretty good. I think the problem is, do you want to play 2 of these? Because the longer the game goes on, the worse they get. So you kind of don't want to play 2 copies in your deck, but if you don't play 2 copies, then drawing the first one is so inconsistent. I think Paladin really has to move to a smaller and faster build in order for this card to really shine. But then again, we should never disregard a 0 mana card. Maybe it's nice to just get a minion into your hand to enable your Librams. Someone on competitive Hearthstone called it Firefly, and that seems pretty apt. But I don't know that current Pally decks want to play Firefly, so I think we'll have to see how much use this gets. I'll give it a 2.5 of 3. Animated Broomstick. So this is a 1 mana 1/1. It's a common neutral minion, and it has Rush, and its battle cry is give all your other minions Rush. So it's kind of like that rogue weapon that costs 1 mana, and the death rattle is like give everybody Rush. It's a cheap one-time magic carpet, and I don't know, could it maybe be worth playing in aggressive tempo style decks? I'm not sure if it really makes too much sense to add into Zoo. I think carpet outclasses it, and as most of your small guys are pretty happy to be vomited out without Rush because you're controlling the board anyway. And your Matron, the 4 mana draw 3, has Rush anyway. I think Carpet is a much better comeback mechanic than this, so I'm actually not sure if this sees any play. I could be wrong. It could be worth playing somewhere, but I'm gonna go with a 2 on this one. Frazzled Freshman. It's a really nice sticky minion for Priest to open with. It has some nice synergy with like Apotheosis, with Veil Weaver. It's much tougher to clear off. It even synergizes with the hero power. It could possibly enable a form of Tempo Priest if they get a few more good tools. I think this is pretty solid. I'm gonna give this a 3. I think it's good. Goody 2 shields. This is actually kind of interesting. 3 mana, 4/2 Divine Shield already is pretty decent. The problem probably is that you're not going to get to activate your spell burst too frequently, I want to say. You don't want to play a spell the same turn that you play this because you haven't lost a Divine Shield yet. And then because your opponent knows that you can just easily get a Divine Shield next turn, this is going to be a pretty high priority target to kill the turn it comes down. From what we've seen in this past meta with Satyr Overseer, almost every class is capable of removing it the turn it comes down and denying the second proc on 4. So this one gets the added benefit of coming with a Divine Shield, which actually I think is not to be scoffed at, because that actually does make it a lot more difficult to clear on 3 than the Satyr Overseer, so maybe it actually does get to proc the Spell Burst once in a while. I think it actually seems pretty strong, quite strong. Paladin minion in the early game, great tempo tool, and the threat of getting that second Divine Shield is just so strong that you really want to just remove this as soon as you can. I think it could be really annoying and probably fits into a lot of different speeds of Paladin builds. It works in a faster deck, and it's also going to be really good in a slower deck, I think, too. Especially with Librams, buffs, all types of things. Like, you really don't want to let this get going. I'm going to give this a 3.5 or 4. I think it's pretty strong. I think it's pretty good. I think it's something that Paladin has been wanting to find. Diligent Note Tagger. Let's talk about this one. This is a really nice tempo tool for Shaman. 2/3/2 is already great. It's a great body, and it can recycle like lightning bolts, the new innervate. You can like double Farsight or double innervate in the turn, and then play something for 4 mana. And you can do this as early as turn 1. You can just coin this and then double innervate, play a 4 mana card, and then you just pass your second turn, which doesn't even feel that bad. I think this should be worth playing in most mid-range builds, and could maybe even catalyze an aggro or a burn style of Shaman deck. I think we're going to see this card for a while. I think I want to give this a 4. I like it. Wretched Tudor. I think this card is super strong as well. I think it's going to open up possibility for the game to slow down a little bit. I think it seems pretty strong as an added AoE in almost any control deck, because most of the control decks should have cheap activators. Like Warrior has Sword and Board, has Shield Slam, Priest has Renew, Shadow Word Death, Penance. Like, you can combine this with Penance, and then you could clear a whole rogue board of lackeys and a Shield of Galakron, which otherwise is so difficult for the Priest to deal with, because the only way to clear the Shield of Galakron is like to time rip it, and then once you time rip, you're out of mana to deal with the lackey board. So this is a pretty good turn 6 answer to a rogue snowballing an early game and then dropping a Shield of Galakron. If you play this with a Penance, I think that's pretty strong. Mage can play this card and freeze a big threat and clear all the others for 5 mana, and that can really help set up your Reno against big fat boards that have kind of snowballed you early. So it really actually has a nice way of being able to slow the game down just a little bit, just the threat of this. I think it looks pretty strong, and it definitely could extend the meta to be a little bit slower and a little bit more oppressive against hyper-aggressive decks. This card completely annihilates current iterations of Demon Hunter. I guess maybe not current post nerfs, but it's just a pretty solid tool against any aggro or tempo-based deck, I think, as long as you get a chance to use it on turn 5 or 6, as long as you can proc it with a spell. And remember that, you could just use this with a coin, and that's kind of a blowout too, possibly. I'm going to give this a 4. I like it. Cult Neophyte, I like this one too. This is really a Lothab type card. Great stat line, so can very easily fit into Zoo or Tempo decks. Depending on how important it is for decks in the meta to play certain spells early, like maybe putting this against a Druid that's going into turn 3 or 4, or maybe just dropping this on a board against like a priest who really wants to Breath of the Infinite, and you just drop this down in such a way that they can't Breath of the Infinite and you protect your board a little bit. I think this could definitely see some play, and I think it should probably make the cut in most Highlander decks as well, because it can have pretty decent value late game if you time it properly. I'm gonna give this a 3.5. I think it's just a pretty solid 2-drop. It's pretty good. Wand Thief. This seems really fun. Rogue loves to pick up random mage spells, and this really enables actually a lot of the Rogue's best tempo tools that we haven't been able to play recently, like the 2-mana 3/4 rush, like Vendetta. You still have to combo it, so it still is a little bit tricky to be able to do some of those things, but I think this is pretty good. And getting to discover a mage spell, mage has a lot of great spells, and a lot of spells that Rogue would love to have. Like, if a Rogue gets a Ray of Frost, it would be nuts, That's, especially if they're trying to move quick and stop some of the, and play a really tight board game. Frostbolt is pretty good. A lot of the burn spells can really help you. I'm not sure if Mage really wants to play this, because Magic Trick is a lot easier to activate, although it doesn't allow you to discover the big spells like Deep Freeze. But this is definitely worth playing, I think, in a fast Rogue deck. And I think it kind of single-handedly can enable Thief Rogue again, because Vendetta is just such a strong tool. And you can almost get the Vendetta active like as early as turn 2. I mean, you could even do it on turn 1, but probably not a whole lot of point to do that. But I think this could be pretty strong in Rogue. I'm not sure how strong it's going to be in Mage, but I like it in Rogue, as I am a primarily Rogue player. I'm going to give this 3.5, 4. I think it's pretty good. Great stat line too. I think it's strong. Oof. Devolving Missiles. This card is going to be so annoying, I feel like, in Mage. Because Mage already has an infinite ways to clear your board. If they want a rolling fireball, but you have more than 8 health, just devolve the missile, devolve first, and then your rolling fireball should clear. This card is probably a dream in Spell Mage to help you keep the board tidy and cleaned up. Mage just has too many options to take advantage of this effect, and if they don't have those options in hand, you can just play this and Evocation. That's 2 mana, and then you still have 8 mana with which to do things. It's super flexible in Mage. In Shaman, I don't know. I don't really know that Shaman even is a class. I forgot that was a class, so I'm not sure how useful this would be. I don't think Shaman found Devolve, the card, to be particularly strong or oppressive or playable, but that was also an extra mana, so I'm not sure. Maybe Shaman can find a way to use this, but I think in Mage it's going to be pretty great. I'm going to give this a 4.5. I think this card is pretty strong. I mean, I don't know necessarily that will always get played, but I think it definitely enables a more control Mage build, and I think most of the Mage decks that we're seeing now in the meta already are kind of slower, like let's control the game kind of decks. So I think it's cool. I like it. Onyx Mage Scribe, 6 mana, 4/9 dragon. Add 2 random spells from your class to your hand when you play a spell. Trying to think of what decks want to play this. In Warlock, we already have the 2 mana, add 2 random Warlock spells to your hand, and we don't play that in Questlock. No current iteration of Warlock plays that card, so I don't think we would play this, even though you do get the body with this. It doesn't make sense in Druid to replace the 4/8 Taunt, which will just discover this card anyway. I think it's too big for Dragon Hunter. I think Dragon Hunter would even rather run Cobalt Spellkin. And this feels a bit slow for Reno Hunter, as I think you want to tempo out as hard as possible with that deck, and this is a little more value-oriented, it's a little slower, especially because, you know, you need to play the 6 mana card, and you also need to play a spell. So, earlier on in the game, this is really just a 6 mana 4/9, which is cool, but you could just play a Twilight Drake, I think, and, like, for example, Reno Mage is always going to get a 4/9 for their Twilight Drake. It might make some sense in Reno Mage, because Mage spells are pretty good, even if they are random. But yeah, you can just play the Twilight Drake, and how badly do you really need the random spell? If you really need random spells, you could just play Evocation, right? You know, I don't know. I feel like in most cases you would actually rather run Spellkin. It's 1 mana cheaper. It's a great body. 3/5 is still a great body, and, you know, the 1 mana spells are pretty easy to play and pretty useful. This is pretty slow most of the time. I don't think you want to run it, but I think you will happily discover it. You know, the 8 mana 4/10 deal 4 damage to 2 different enemies. You never play that dragon, but it feels good to discover it once in a while. I think this is that kind of card. You know, Rogue doesn't want to play this. There's way too many junk spells in Rogue, like the 1 mana spells, the weapon, you know, dirty or deadly poison and things like that in decks where you're not really wanting to play weapons. Secrets suck. The heavy spells like the make 3 shadows spell, or the assassination or contracts, things like that. Rogue just has much more efficient spells in its arsenal. They would always rather play Spellkin, I think. And they don't even want to play Spellkin, you know. And you just already have Spell Lackey to discover, and Spell Lackey's already probably the weakest Lackey in Rogue. So I don't think anybody's really going to be playing this, but it could be a great discover tool, and it's definitely a welcome addition to that discover pool. I'm going to give this a 2, but I think it's going to be I think it will possibly see play just from being discovered. Oof. This card is nuts. This card is crazy. Gain 2 mana crystals, innervate, OG innervate, and you overload 2. Druid does not care about the overload at all in its current iteration. Spell Druid is all about setting up big power turns and then blowing its whole load on that turn with the Mount Seller. And early game, it allows you to overgrow earlier. And honestly, actually, even with overgrow, this card, the overgrow negates the overload. So you can really just overgrow on 2, and then you can still Fungal Fortunes on 3. It's kind of nuts. This enables your big Mount Seller turns on 7. And of course, it also allows you the flexibility to do almost anything you want going into a turn where you know you're going to be floating mana or hero powering anyway, which Spell Druid does occasionally do. Not even just occasionally, I would say Spell Druid floats mana and hero powers just to utilize mana, probably more than any other deck in the meta. So I think this is actually, they don't care. Shaman could possibly be allowed to do certain unfair things by having this card, so I like that Shaman gets it. I don't know too much about Shaman and what they were going to want to do, and I guess we're going to see what new cards get added, but I think this card should be killer. This card should be amazing. I'm going to give this a 5. Oh my god, Troublemaker. This one is also crazy. This card is basically Priestess of Fury, 1 turn later, right? Any warrior deck that can survive until turn 8 will absolutely want to run this card. It already has so many control tools that this should be pretty easy to drop, and you could possibly even snowball this card pretty easily with a lot of the control tools that Warrior has. It has immediate board presence and strong tempo as well, which can remove. I was thinking about this, a counterpart to Katrina. Katrina is such a big pain to deal with the 6/8 body, and it doesn't even necessarily affect the board. Katrina just resurrects something. This is summoning 2 guys that will attack enemy things and possibly kill them. Warrior gets to run 2 of these. Katrina half the time is just going to pull you a Psycho Pump, and this gets you 2 Psycho Pumps that actually already attack other enemies, so that's pretty sick. 8 health is just so much, and I think this is proactive enough to warrant playing in almost any iteration of Warrior. As long as you can survive to turn 8 and reasonably slot this in, like you're going to slot this in. I think it could definitely be a prime target for a nerf if Warrior starts getting out of hand, because it's just really strong. They could nerf it in terms of like summoning 2/3 ruffians or 2/2 ruffians. You could maybe, probably have to adjust the stats as well. I don't know, we'll have to see what kind of things happen with this, but I think this card is definitely going to be a Troublemaker. Very nice name. I'm going to give that a 5. 5 for Troublemaker. Shando. Give beast in your deck +1/+1, or transform into a copy of a friendly beast. I think it's pretty decent. It's quite flexible in that it can operate as a finisher with your Bran on turn 10, or you can even tempo it out earlier, or with a beast. If Druid or Hunter gets some more good beasts this set, this card could be pretty amazing. But as of now, Reno Hunter plays Zigzor, Griffin, Phase Stalker. I think that's it. I guess you can slot this in early game. It's fine to buff those cards in your deck. And I guess mainly you would want to use this to enable your 16 damage from hand on turn 10. If Hunter gets any more beasts that are worth running, though, I think this could be a pretty solid inclusion, although I definitely think you want to use this for its cloning effect as often as you can. Combining this with like a 5 or 6 cost beast would be a pretty great play. Really strong tempo tool. And I guess it remains to be seen if we'll get something like that. I'm going to give this a 3, 3.5. I think it could be cool. And it definitely activates, beast decks a little bit more. So it's nice. It's quite flexible. Rattle Tomorrow. This is a cool concept, but I don't think it's going to see much play at all. It's really a horrible standalone play because it doesn't affect the board at all. It just puts a 9/9 on board that you can ignore. Your opponent can ignore. It only works in the Uber control list of metas, which I don't know if we're going to get there this expansion, with Demon Hunter being so powerful, even despite all the nerfs. And Warrior already has a great matchup against Demon Hunter in its current iteration, so I don't see why it would get slower unless it was forced to by another option in the meta. But if there was a fatigue meta, this card is absolutely insane and requires you to save your Zephrys or bust. But even most cards with potential for control should be able to silence or transform this with relative ease, as well. Hex, Polymorph, Priest can silence, Devolving Missiles. I think this will probably be most annoying as an Evolve or Conjurer's Calling result. So as cool as I think it's a 2, maybe even a 1. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be that good. But it looks pretty awesome. And that's about it for now. We'll do some more as we get more.